Back in 2021, I was 41 and running solo hauls across state lines, mostly through the South. I lived just outside Mobile, Alabama, and I'd built a decent living with my own rig, nothing fancy but reliable. I'd take any job that paid well and didn't smell like trouble. But that year, with fuel costs rising and freight slowing down, I started bending that second rule a little. I was used to long, quiet nights behind the wheel, with gas station coffee and old country playing low on the radio. That routine gave me a weird comfort. But this one job, the one that came out of nowhere from a contact I barely knew, ripped that comfort away like someone cutting the brakes on a downhill slope. The guy's name was Reggie, someone I'd met once or twice at a truck stop in Lufkin, Texas. We'd talked about rates and gear, just trucker stuff. Out of the blue, he calls and says he's got a high-paying overnight run for me. $7,000 cash, no questions asked. The pickup was from a private warehouse just a few miles from the Texas border. No company name on the building, just a padlocked gate and a guy waiting with bolt cutters. That should have been my first clue. But I was tired, low on work, and the pay was too good to ignore. The crate was already sealed and loaded by the time I got there, strapped down tight inside a plain white trailer. No manifests, no logos. They handed me a burner phone with one number programmed in and said they'd call if they needed to reach me. "Keep it moving, no stops," the guy added, before waving me off. I left the warehouse just before 9 p.m., heading east along back roads as instructed. I was maybe 3 hours into the haul, somewhere near Jasper, when I saw headlights flying up behind me. Bright, fast. An SUV with no markings, just a strobe of red and blue lights stuck to the dash. My first thought was maybe I'd blown through a speed zone or had a taillight out, so I pulled over like anyone would. The SUV skidded a little too hard on the shoulder, and two guys stepped out, no uniforms, just jeans and jackets. One flashed a badge real quick, too quick, and said they were with Interstate Task Enforcement. Never heard of that in my life. The other guy hung back by my passenger door, hand resting on something inside his coat. My gut was screaming, but it didn't click fast enough. They said there'd been a report about suspicious cargo, and they needed to inspect the trailer. I started to argue, asking for credentials or at least a call to dispatch, but the one near my door cut me off by pulling a pistol and pointing it straight at my chest. "Out! Now!" he said, voice flat like he'd done this before. That's when I knew this wasn't a random stop. My hands went up, heart slamming so hard I felt it in my throat. I stepped down slow, trying not to look panicked. The guy with the gun shoved me toward the ditch while the other one opened the trailer. He whistled low when he looked inside. I didn't even know what was in there at that point, but from the way they looked at each other, like kids on Christmas morning, I could tell it was bad. Real bad. I couldn't see what they were doing exactly, but I heard the click of crates being pried open and the unmistakable sound of metal shifting, like weapons being handled. My stomach turned. The guy watching me was still holding the gun, now down at his side, but his eyes never left me. "You didn't look inside, huh?" he asked, almost like he was disappointed. I didn't answer. What the hell could I say? I was just a driver, doing a job. But I knew right then I was in way over my head. They hadn't pulled me over to check anything. They knew exactly what was in that trailer. This wasn't theft. It was a transfer, a hijacking. And they weren't random thugs either. There was something too smooth about how they moved, too rehearsed. They talked in low voices for a bit, then started hauling two of the crates into the SUV. One of them turned to me and said, "You're gonna finish the route, like nothing happened. Understand?" I nodded slowly, trying to hide how bad my hands were shaking. "And don't even think about making any calls. GPS is live, and we'll know every stop you make. If you screw this up, we're not gonna ask twice." Then they were gone. No names, no plates, just dust kicking up into the trees as they peeled out. I stood there for a few seconds, heart hammering, throat dry before climbing back into the truck. My legs felt like jelly. Every instinct told me to drive straight to the nearest police station, but something else, the look in their eyes, that calculated calm, told me I'd never make it. I drove for another hour, but my mind was spinning in circles. I didn't even want to glance in the rear view. I kept checking the burner phone, half expecting a call, a message, something. Nothing came through. When I finally pulled into a 24-hour gas station to use the restroom, just a quick stop, less than 5 minutes, I saw a dark pickup parked across the lot. Lights off, engine running. Could have been nothing, sure. But when I stepped out, the pickup pulled forward real slow, passed me once, then looped back around without stopping. I didn't even go inside. I jumped back in and peeled out like the place was on fire. That's when it hit me. These guys weren't bluffing. They were tracking me. That trailer wasn't just full of illegal guns, it was bait. And I was the dumbass hauling it through small-town highways like a target with headlights. By the time I reached Louisiana, I was running on caffeine and pure panic. Every time a car came up behind me, I thought it was them. Every light in the distance looked like another unmarked vehicle about to cut me off. I couldn't call the cops. What was I going to say? That I took a job moving mystery crates from a warehouse with no name, got held at gunpoint, and now might be part of some cartel weapons route? They'd arrest me first, ask questions later. So I kept driving. At some point I realized the only way out was to ditch the load, but that was easier said than done. The GPS was active, and I had no idea where the tracker was. Could have been in the trailer, the crates, hell, maybe even inside the damn truck. I finally made it to the drop-off location around 5 a.m., just outside Baton Rouge. The address was another anonymous warehouse, but this one looked less sketchy. Cleaner, security cameras, even a loading dock with motion lights. I backed the trailer in, killed the engine, and waited. A man in a navy windbreaker came out, didn't say a word, just pointed to the dock. He never made eye contact, never asked for paperwork. I stood there while a forklift moved the last of the crates into the building. Then he gave me a nod, turned around, and disappeared inside. That was it. No signature, no confirmation, no handshake. The moment the trailer was empty, I unhooked it and got the hell out of there. My hands were still shaking. I didn't even ask for the rest of the payment. About 20 minutes down the road, the burner phone finally lit up. One message. Job complete. Don't contact us again. I tossed that thing out the window doing 80 down I-10. When I got home, I parked the truck, locked every door and window in the house, and didn't sleep for 2 days. I kept expecting someone to show up, either the guys from the road or someone higher up, but no one ever came. I checked the rig for trackers 3 separate times. Nothing. Clean. To this day, I don't know how they kept eyes on me. Maybe the GPS was in the crates, maybe it was a bluff. But they knew my stops. They knew I hesitated. That part still haunts me. After that, I stopped taking under-the-table jobs. Lost a lot of income that year, but I didn't care. My wife thought I was having a breakdown, and maybe I was. I started sleeping with a revolver under the bed again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. Sometimes I'd get spam calls and my heart would just stop, thinking it was them. I even changed my number, sold the truck, bought a new one, tried to disappear a little. But the fear never really left. It's not like the movies, where the bad guys come knocking with ski masks and machine guns. It's worse when they don't, when they let you live, when they let you wonder if they're still watching. I never found out who Reggie really worked for. The number he gave me stopped working a week later, and none of the other truckers I knew had heard from him since. I still wonder if he ever existed at all. Maybe I was just a pawn in a longer game, some middleman delivery for a trade bigger than I could imagine. But every time I see an SUV with no plates or pass a warehouse in the middle of nowhere, I get that same feeling in my gut. the one that says I'm not supposed to be here. I survived, yeah, but I wasn't the same after that night. That road changed me, and I'll never forget how close I came to vanishing without a trace. I've been driving trucks for almost 30 years now, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's to trust my instincts, especially when something feels off. Name's Dave. I'm 54, been working for a major logistics company most of my adult life. I've done coast-to-coast runs, tight city deliveries, graveyard shifts. You name it. This happened last fall, around mid-October. I was on a regular route out of Memphis, just a trailer swap like I'd done 100 times before. But this one night, it still messes with my head. I've told a few people about it, but never really put it all out there. Maybe it'll help me sleep better. It started like any other shift. I just fueled up and pulled into our Memphis yard to grab my next trailer, number 498. Usually, we have to drop our current trailer, park, then go hook up to the next one. But when I rolled in, the yard guy flagged me down and told me 498 was already hooked and ready to go. Said someone prepped it earlier for a rush run. I remember thinking that was odd, because that's not our standard procedure, and I didn't recognize the guy. He was maybe in his late 20s, wore a company vest but didn't say much. Just pointed, signed off my paperwork, and walked off like he had somewhere more important to be. Still, I'm not the kind of guy to kick up a fuss over small stuff. I did a quick walk around. Tires looked fine, seal was intact. Nothing jumped out at me. The paperwork said I was hauling dry goods, cleaning supplies, paper products, stuff like that. Easy enough. I hit the road heading northeast, thinking I'd knock out a few hours before grabbing some shut-eye. About an hour in, somewhere past Jackson, I started hearing something. A faint thump, like a broomstick falling over. Then nothing. Then another soft tap, like someone nudging a wall with their knuckle. I figured it was just cargo shifting. Happens all the time, especially if it's not strapped down tight. But the noises kept happening, random, spaced out, like something was moving. Not sliding, but adjusting. Like it was alive. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was probably a loose pallet or some plastic wrap coming undone. But around 1:30 a.m., I hit a way station just over the Tennessee line. Did my routine walk around like always, and when I passed by the rear doors, I froze. I heard 3 taps, clear, spaced out, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, not frantic, just human. I waited, heart pounding, but it didn't repeat. I went back to the cab and called dispatch. Told them I thought someone might be inside. They brushed it off. Said maybe the load had shifted, or I was just tired. Told me to ignore it and stay on schedule. Something about their tone didn't sit right with me. I got back in the cab, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The taps weren't cargo. I've heard cargo shift. I know that sound like I know my own heartbeat. This was something else. My hands were slick on the wheel, and every few miles I found myself glancing in the mirrors like I expected to see something crawling out the back. About 30 minutes later, I saw a sign for an old rest area I'd used once or twice over the years. It was barely lit, usually empty, and tucked off a long stretch of highway. I figured I'd pull in, crack the trailer open just enough to take a look. Maybe I'd find nothing and feel like an idiot. Or maybe I'd finally get some peace of mind. I pulled in and backed the rig up near the far end of the lot, where a flickering lamppost threw more shadow than light. The place was dead silent. No other trucks, no cars, just the hum of the engine and some wind rustling through the trees. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the rear. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd puke. I popped the seal and slowly undid the lock. As soon as the doors creaked open, the smell hit me. Sweat, plastic, and something sharp, like fear. I shined the light inside and saw them. Two teenage girls, maybe 15 or 16, duct tape over their mouths, wrists and ankles tied with zip ties. They were huddled against the far wall, eyes wide, blinking into the light like they hadn't seen it in days. I couldn't even move at first. I just stood there, frozen. One of them, brunette, skinny, with a swollen eye, tried to say something behind the tape, but it came out as a muffled cry. I snapped out of it and reached for my phone, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. Dialed 911 and told the dispatcher I found two girls locked in my trailer. She asked for the mile marker, asked if they were breathing, if they were conscious. I barely got the words out when I saw headlights behind me. Too close, too fast. I turned, still on the phone, as a black SUV pulled into the lot and stopped about 15 feet behind my rig. The dispatcher was still talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. My blood ran cold. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, built like a linebacker, wearing dark clothes and gloves. He didn't hesitate. He reached into the SUV and pulled out a shotgun, like it was routine. I ducked behind the trailer, whispering into the phone now, begging them to hurry. The girls started crying louder, the sound tearing through the night like glass. The man took a few steps forward, slow and steady, like he knew I had nowhere to go. I had no weapon, no way to defend myself. All I could think about was keeping him away from those girls. My breathing got so loud I was afraid it would give me away. I stayed crouched low, barely daring to look around the edge. Then I heard it. The faintest wail of sirens, far off but getting closer. The man must have heard it too because he stopped. For a split second he just stood there, head tilted like he was listening. Then he turned, calmly walked back to the SUV, tossed the shotgun inside, and peeled out of the lot without looking back. No screeching tires, no panic. Just cold efficiency. I stayed hidden until the flashing lights appeared, and when the cops finally surrounded me, I came out with my hands up, shaking like a leaf. I couldn't stop repeating myself. They're in the trailer, two girls. I didn't know. One of the officers nodded like he'd seen it all before. That chilled me almost as much as the rest. They cut the girls loose and called in paramedics. One of the officers, name was Collins, I think, pulled me aside and asked me to explain everything again, from the beginning. I told him about the guy at the yard who gave me the pre-hooked trailer, about the sounds, the taps, the call to dispatch. His face tightened at the mention of dispatch. I even showed him the logs and call history on my phone. He just nodded, didn't say much. Before they let me go, he told me in a low voice, "You did the right thing stopping. Most don't." That sentence stuck with me. Most don't. How many other trailers are out there with people locked inside? How many drivers just keep going? Back at the yard a few days later, I asked around. Described the guy who gave me the trailer. No one knew who I was talking about. Security footage from that night? Corrupted, they said. Dispatch? Didn't recall that call, even though I had it logged. HR told me to take a week off and not talk about it. Said they were investigating internally. That was the end of it. No follow-up, no report shared, nothing on the news. It vanished like it never happened. I started looking for other jobs after that, and I haven't trusted a single trailer I've picked up since. I check everyone now, seal or not. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped. If I just kept going, like dispatch told me to. Or worse, if I'd opened that trailer just a few minutes later, when that SUV pulled in. The girls survived, thank God. But I don't sleep the same anymore. I keep replaying the moment that guy looked right at me and decided not to pull the trigger. Was it the sirens? Or did he already get what he wanted? I'll probably never know. But if you're a driver reading this, check your trailers. No matter what. No matter how routine it seems. You never know what someone might have hidden back there. My name's Eli, I'm 34, and I run my own small freight company out of Richmond, Kentucky. I haul mostly within-state loads, nothing glamorous, equipment, lumber, supplies, but it keeps me busy and pays the bills. I've been doing this solo for a few years now, just me and my rig, and I've learned to handle most problems on my own. I'm not the kind of guy to ask for help easily, especially on the road. But that night was different. I was coming back from a delivery near Corbin, heading north on I-75, and I had maybe an hour left before I could get home, take a hot shower and crash. I didn't even see what I hit, just this sharp pop, and suddenly my front driver's side tire was shredded. I pulled off as far as I could onto the shoulder, hazard lights on, pissed off but calm. It wasn't my first blowout, but the location sucked. Dead stretch of highway, barely any light, and barely any shoulder. Trucks were flying past so fast the wind rocked my cab. I stepped out, gave the tire a look, and yeah, it was toast. Normally, I'd swap in the spare, but the jack was giving me hell, and after nearly snapping my wrist trying to get it loose, I gave up and called roadside. That was at 9:12 p.m. I remember because I checked the time while on hold with dispatch. They said someone would be there in 45 minutes to an hour. Cool. I settled back in my seat, pulled out a protein bar, and figured I'd scroll a bit to kill time. But here's the weird part. Not even 15 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up behind me. No lights, no siren, just crept up like it had been watching. The truck was old, white, beat to hell, and didn't have any logos. No company name, no contact number. Just plain and dusty. The guy who hopped out looked like he belonged to that truck. Mid-40s maybe, sunken cheeks, black hoodie under a frayed denim jacket, and this thick gray beard that almost hid his neck. I got out and asked if he was with the dispatch I'd called, and he nodded without really looking at me. "Got the call? You Eli?" he asked, already walking to the front of my rig. I should have said something right there, but I was tired, and the thought of sitting on that shoulder another hour didn't sit right with me. So I said yeah. We hooked the truck up, and I climbed into the cab of his wrecker. That's when things started to feel off. He didn't ask me where I wanted to go, just mumbled something about a shop nearby, and started driving. I figured maybe he already knew the local places. Maybe he worked with them. Still, something about how quiet he was, how he kept glancing at me from the side, made my skin itch. We weren't heading toward Richmond. I recognized that almost immediately. Instead, he took a left off the next exit, past 2 gas stations, and headed into a part of town I'd never even seen. More warehouses, fences, and no lights. I asked him, "Hey man, what shop are we going to?" He didn't answer, just turned up the static-filled radio a bit and kept driving. About 10 minutes later, we pulled into this busted-up lot surrounded by a chain-link fence. There was a rusted sign that said, "North Ridge Auto Salvage," but it looked like no one had operated out of there in years. We rolled over broken glass and weeds poking through cracked concrete, and I started getting this tight feeling in my chest. The gate was already open, but he stopped just inside and stepped out without a word. I stayed in the cab, watching him disappear toward the back of a dark shed. That's when I noticed there were no other vehicles in the yard. No staff, no floodlights, just silence and metal carcasses piled up like a graveyard. I reached for my phone, but of course, no signal out there. Nothing. Just a spinning wheel and a sinking feeling. When he came back, he was walking slower. There was something in his hand, but I couldn't see it clearly through the windshield. I opened the door, trying to stay cool, and asked again, "This really the place?" He didn't even answer this time. Just stepped up close, rested one hand on the door frame, and said in a low voice, "Cash and keys, man. Now." My stomach dropped. At first I thought he was joking or maybe trying to shake me down lightly, but then I saw what was in his hand. A pistol, small and greasy looking, but real. He kept it low, half hidden under his jacket, but the threat was crystal clear. "Don't make this hard," he muttered. My first instinct was to lunge, but something in me said, wait. He wasn't alone. I twisted like I was reaching for my wallet, but instead slammed the door into him and tried to jump out the other side. That's when I heard gravel crunching behind me. Another man, taller, bald, wearing a dirty flannel and holding a crowbar, stepped out from behind a rusted van like he'd been waiting for this. I barely dodged when he swung. The metal hit the side mirror with a crack, and I took off running through the yard, dodging tires and scrap like my life depended on it. Because it did. I could hear them behind me, yelling to each other, calling me names, but I didn't look back. I ducked through a gap in the fence and found myself in another industrial lot, pitch black, scattered with junk and half-collapsed sheds. I had no clue where I was. My legs were burning, lungs screaming, and I could still hear footsteps somewhere behind me. The ground was uneven, littered with debris, and I almost ate it stepping into what I thought was grass, but turned out to be a pit full of soaked insulation. I scrambled out, covered in grime, and found a narrow alley between two brick warehouses. I crouched low, trying to quiet my breathing. For a second, everything went silent. No voices, no footsteps. Just a low hum from some transformer nearby and the occasional creak of metal shifting in the wind. I didn't know if they'd given up or if they were circling around. My heart was thudding so loud I swore it would give me away. I waited maybe 3 minutes in that alley, every second stretching like an hour. Then I heard it, a quiet scuff, not far behind me. I turned just in time to see the guy with the crowbar creeping along the opposite wall. He hadn't seen me yet, but he was close. Too close. I picked up a chunk of broken brick lying next to me and hurled it down the alley in the opposite direction. It shattered against a dumpster with a loud clang, and the guy whipped around toward the sound. I used that moment to bolt again, this time staying low, hugging the side of the warehouse until I spotted a break in the fence ahead. I slipped through it, cutting my arm on the rusted edge, and found myself in a parking lot behind what looked like a loading dock. Still no people. Still no lights. Just shadows. That's when I saw salvation. A glowing blue light about 2 blocks away. A gas station. The kind of gas station that stays open all night for truckers. I didn't think. I just ran. Full sprint, full panic. I crossed the lot, nearly slipped on wet pavement, and sprinted straight through the bushes and across a shallow ditch. I didn't look back until I burst into the station, bleeding, drenched in sweat, and gasping for air. The guy behind the counter, a teenager in a red hoodie, looked up like he'd just seen a ghost. I slammed my hands on the counter and said, "Call the cops, I'm being chased." His eyes went wide, and without asking questions, he picked up the phone. Police showed up maybe 10 minutes later. By then, I'd calmed down enough to give them a description of the 2 guys in the tow truck. We went back out to where I said it all started, but of course, no truck, no salvage yard, no sign anyone had been there. Just a padlocked gate and a "for lease" sign on the fence. The officer said the place had been abandoned for over a year. I showed them where I cut my arm, where I climbed through the fence, even the busted mirror on my rig, but nothing concrete tied it to them. They took my statement, told me they'd file a report, and offered to drive me back to my truck. I was shaking the whole way. When I got back to the highway, my rig was still there, untouched. I ended up getting a real tow from a verified service the next morning, after sleeping a few hours in the truck with my knife under my pillow. I didn't leave it again until the sun came up. Every time I heard an engine, I jolted awake thinking it was them coming back. I filed another report later that day, and they said I wasn't the first. Turns out there were at least 3 other cases of fake tows showing up along I-75 in the last few months. 2 involved robberies, and 1 guy went completely missing. That part still haunts me. I never got a name, a plate, nothing. Just a face burned into my memory and that junkyard smell I can't stand anymore. Since then, I've changed how I handle roadside calls. I confirm everything twice, never wait inside another vehicle, and keep a second phone hidden in my rig just in case. I still drive, still haul, but something in me shifted that night. It's like I crossed some line where the world doesn't feel as safe or solid anymore. Just thin, like it could break open at any moment and something awful could crawl through. So yeah, that's my story. Just a guy trying to get home who ended up running for his life through the dark, chased by strangers with a crowbar and a gun. Watch who you trust out there. I've been hauling freight for close to 13 years now, mostly running loads up and down the southeast. You get used to the silence, the monotony, the way the night plays tricks on your mind when you've been driving for hours. Back in July 2021, I was headed southbound through a lonely stretch of Highway 94 in southern Georgia, about 30 miles outside of Fargo, pulling an empty trailer back home. It was just past 2 in the morning, and the only thing I was thinking about was getting some shut-eye before my next pickup. I'd stopped for coffee in a little gas station near Homerville around midnight, filled up, checked my tires like I always do. Everything looked fine. About an hour later, the rig started making this ugly, high-pitched screech, something in the axle, maybe the suspension. I eased onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking into the night, and rolled to a stop just past a faded green mile marker with no number on it. No other cars had passed me for at least 20 minutes. I got out with my flashlight, walked around the truck, and saw something dripping underneath the trailer. Not oil, but some kind of fluid I couldn't place. I wasn't going anywhere without help. I called a mobile mechanic service I've used before out of Waycross. They told me someone would be out in about an hour, maybe a bit more. So I did what any other trucker would do. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, cracked the window for air, and settled in to wait. I wasn't tired anymore, though. Something about being stranded on a pitch-black road surrounded by pine trees that seemed to lean in closer the longer I stared at them. Yeah, it messes with your head. That's when I first noticed it. Just beyond the edge of the tree line across the highway, maybe 70 feet back, there was this white sedan. It was barely visible, mostly covered by low-hanging branches, but I could see the glint of a chrome bumper and the faint outline of the roof under the moonlight. At first I figured it was abandoned. You see that kind of thing more than you'd think. But even from inside my cab, something about the way it was angled, half hidden like that, didn't sit right with me. I kept glancing over every few minutes, and it was still there, same spot. But around 20 minutes later, I noticed it had moved. Not a lot, but enough that it was more exposed, like it had inched out from behind the trees. I hadn't heard an engine, no headlights, nothing. Just closer. I sat up straight, turned off the cab lights to see better, and that's when I realized someone might be in there, watching me. I don't scare easy. You can't work nights on the road for over a decade and jump at every shadow. But there was something about that car, how it just crept forward like it had a mind of its own, no lights, no sound, that had my nerves tightening. I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone just pulled off the road to nap or take a leak and didn't want to be seen. But that explanation didn't hold up for long, because 20 minutes later, when I looked again, the car had moved even closer. This time it was right near the ditch, maybe 40 feet away. Still no headlights, still no sign of a driver. I rolled down the window more, listening. Nothing but the hum of bugs and the occasional snap of a twig in the woods. I grabbed my flashlight and considered stepping out, but something held me back. A kind of heavy feeling in my chest, like I was being warned. That's when I noticed the faintest glint of movement near the tree line, not far from the car. I leaned forward, squinting through the dark. There was someone there. I couldn't see their face, but the shape of a person was unmistakable. Tall, still, partially hidden behind a tree. They were holding something up to their face. I thought at first it might be binoculars, but then I saw the small flicker of light. It was a camera. They were taking photos. The flash was barely visible, like they had some kind of cover over it. Every few seconds, a tiny pulse of light would flicker. I froze. Who the hell sits in the woods at 2:30 in the morning taking pictures of a broken-down trucker? I grabbed my CB mic and pretended to radio in, hoping that if they were listening, they'd think someone knew where I was. No response, obviously. I didn't want to make a real call over the CB unless it was serious, and I still wasn't sure if I was just losing it from exhaustion. But when I looked again, the figure was gone. Just gone. No movement, no sound, like they'd melted into the woods. I finally decided to get out and confront whoever was messing with me. I took my flashlight and my tire iron and crossed the road slowly, my boots crunching the gravel louder than I liked. The sedan was there, closer than ever. The front end now angled slightly toward my rig, like it had turned to face me. As I got within a few feet, I saw the windows were tinted almost black. I walked around the front, tapped on the glass with the flashlight. Nothing. No movement, no response. But the engine was warm. I placed my hand on the hood. It had been running recently. That's when I felt it. That heavy, sinking feeling again, like someone was watching me. I turned slowly toward the trees. My light scanned the tree line slowly. Nothing. Just rows of pines, dense underbrush, and shadows so thick they looked like walls. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, trying to steady my breathing, trying to listen past the ringing in my ears. And then right as I started to lower the flashlight, I saw it. Just for a split second. A face. Not clearly, but enough. Pale, round, with dark eyes that didn't blink, staring at me from behind a tree about 10 feet in. And then it disappeared. No crunching leaves, no sound at all. It was like whoever, or whatever, it was just sank back into the woods like fog. I backed away toward the sedan, keeping the light on the spot where I'd seen the face. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my neck. I circled the car again, trying the door handles this time. All locked. No plates either. Just a clean, white sedan with no identifying marks, sitting in the dark, like it had been waiting for someone. I turned and made my way back to my truck as fast as I could without running, tire iron still clenched tight in one hand. I didn't look back. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door shut, and locked it. When I finally glanced in the mirror, the sedan was gone. No sound, no tires on gravel, it just wasn't there anymore. I sat frozen in the cab, waiting for any hint that it was still nearby. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The mechanic finally showed up around 3:45 a.m., driving a rust-red pickup with a busted passenger mirror. I jumped out the second he parked and asked if he'd seen a white sedan on his way in. He shook his head, said the road was empty the whole way from Waycross. I didn't even bother trying to explain. What was I gonna say? That some stranger had been hiding in the woods, taking pictures of me, and vanished into thin air? He fixed up the issue. Turns out it was a cracked coolant line, and had me ready to roll in about 40 minutes. But I couldn't stop checking my mirrors. Every mile felt longer than the last. I didn't sleep that day, even after I got home. The worst part? A week later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside were 6 printed photos, all black and white, grainy. Each one showed my rig, parked on the side of the road, from different angles. One was taken from up high, maybe from a tree. Another had my silhouette lit by the interior light while I sat waiting in the cab. But the last one was taken from just outside my driver's side window. And I swear I never saw anyone that close. I kept that envelope for a long time. Never told my wife, never showed the photos to anyone. I didn't want to explain something I couldn't understand myself. I checked with the post office a few days later, asked if there were any cameras near the box that could have caught who dropped it off, but they just shrugged, said it could have been slipped in any time, maybe even by hand. No fingerprints on the photos, no smudges, nothing. Just that same eerie silence that followed me from that night. For weeks after, I kept seeing white sedans out of the corner of my eye, at gas stations, on overpasses, in my mirror late at night. Most of the time they were just normal cars, I think. I switched routes not long after. Asked my dispatcher to keep me off the southern stretch near Fargo. Told him I had a weird breakdown experience and didn't feel good about going back out there. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. But I've heard stories since then. Quiet ones, things shared between drivers at rest stops or late-night diners. Stories about other trucks breaking down on that same road. Other drivers who felt like they were being watched. Some of them saw lights in the woods. Some heard footsteps around their cabs. One guy even said he woke up with muddy handprints on his window. I never asked for details. I've learned to let it go, mostly. Life on the road teaches you to move on quick, keep your eyes forward. But every once in a while, when the road gets too quiet and there's nothing around but trees and sky, I think about that face behind the tree. About the silence. About how someone watched me for over an hour, inching closer without ever being seen, without making a sound. And the way that sedan disappeared like it was never really there. I still don't know what they wanted. Maybe it was just to remind me that no matter how alone you think you are out there, someone could always be watching. I've been a long-haul trucker for over 12 years now, mostly hauling goods through the Midwest and northern states. This happened in late January, about 3 years ago, during one of the nastiest blizzards I've ever seen in Wyoming. I was on a cross-country run from Nebraska to Oregon with my co-driver, Jesse. We'd only been working together for a couple months, but we got along fine. Quiet guy, early 40s, ex-mechanic, didn't talk much but always had a thermos of black coffee and old country playing in the background. That night, after pushing through hours of whiteout conditions, we decided to pull over at a small gas station just outside Rawlins. It wasn't much, a Sinclair with a flickering sign, one pump working, and a parking lot barely plowed. But it was something. We parked the rig off to the side of the building, engine idling, heater on low. I told Jesse I was gonna rest my eyes for a bit. He nodded and said he might go inside to stretch. I must have dozed off for no more than 30 or 40 minutes. When I woke up, the cab was cold. Jesse wasn't in the passenger seat. The door was shut, no wind howling through it, nothing to suggest he'd left in a rush. I looked around. His thermos was still in the cup holder, his gloves on the dash, and his phone right there on the seat. That's what felt wrong first. Jesse was always glued to that thing during breaks, texting someone. I assumed a girlfriend or wife, but he never talked much about his personal life. I figured maybe he'd just gone inside, but when I looked over, the gas station lights were off. Closed. Sign on the door said they shut down at midnight. It was nearly 1:30 in the morning by then. I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the snow. The wind hit me like a freight train the second I opened the door. I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Everything was white. Snow blowing sideways, that kind that pelts your face like sandpaper. I trudged across the lot toward the station, boots crunching over ice, calling Jesse's name a few times. Nothing. No answer. I peeked inside, dark. No one at the counter, no movement. I circled the building, checked behind the dumpsters, even banged on the back door in case someone was inside. But it was dead silent. When I came back to the truck, I noticed Jesse's wallet still in the door pocket. That was the second thing that got me. He never left the cab without it. It had his license, company card, everything. I started to feel this heavy weight in my chest. Not panic, not yet, but something colder. I ended up calling 911 around 2 a.m. A deputy showed up about an hour later, slow going in the storm. He was a younger guy, name was Riker, bundled up like he'd walked out of a snowmobile catalog. I explained everything, how Jesse was here when I fell asleep, how I assumed he went inside, and how everything he owned was still in the truck. Riker took a walk around the lot with his flashlight, but the snow had already filled in most of the footprints. No signs of struggle, no blood, nothing. He checked the gas station's exterior cameras, but the power had cut out earlier that night from the storm, so the footage was corrupted, just static. The whole place felt off, like we were standing inside a snow globe someone had just shaken too hard. The deputy stayed with me until sunrise. I didn't sleep. I just kept watching the road, thinking Jesse might come trudging back through the snow, maybe half frozen and pissed off, but alive. But nothing moved out there except the wind and a few trucks rumbling by in the distance. Around 7 a.m., another patrol unit radioed in. They'd found something strange about 10 miles west, off Route 287. Riker looked at me and asked if Jesse owned a brown Carhartt jacket. I told him yeah, he wore it every damn day. The deputy just nodded, didn't say much, but told me to follow him in my rig if I could. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went numb. I didn't want to believe it was anything serious, but my stomach was twisting. We pulled off near a frozen field, flat land, completely untouched by tire tracks or footprints. Just miles of crusted-over snow and silence. There was a rusted barbed wire fence separating the road from the field, and there, hanging like someone had gently draped it over a clothesline, was Jesse's jacket. It looked too clean. No snow on it, no tears, just hanging. The sleeves dangled perfectly downward like someone had smoothed them out. There were no footprints leading up to the fence. The snow was completely undisturbed on both sides, like the jacket had appeared there out of nowhere. Riker kept looking around, quiet. I walked up to the fence and just stared at it, scared to touch it, like it might burn me or vanish the second I reached for it. I kept asking if they'd found any signs, tire tracks, a dropped glove, anything. But the answer was always the same. Nothing. No one had seen Jesse. No calls from him. His phone still hadn't moved from the passenger seat. It was like he stepped out of the truck and into thin air. I started to question everything. Did he wander off in a daze? Did someone take him? But why leave his phone, his wallet, his coat? Why would he walk 10 miles into the middle of a snow-covered field with no gear? I even started wondering if he'd been having some kind of breakdown. But the Jesse I knew was calm, sharp, the kind of guy who kept a knife sharpener in the glove box, just in case. Nothing about this made sense. Later that afternoon, detectives came by and took statements, but I could tell they didn't know what to do with any of it. They treated me like I might be hiding something, asking the same questions over and over. When did you fall asleep? Did you hear anything? Did Jesse have enemies? I understood, I really did, but I didn't have answers. I was just a guy who took a nap and woke up to find his partner erased from the planet. They bagged the jacket, took some photos, and told me they'd be in touch. I drove off that night alone, the bunk behind me feeling way too empty. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting Jesse to sit up from the sleeper and call me an idiot for leaving without him. Weeks went by, then months. I kept in touch with the sheriff's office, but there was never any update. Jesse was listed as missing, presumed dead, but no body was ever found. His family held a small memorial in Cheyenne. I went. Didn't know what to say to his sister, just handed her the thermos he left behind and said he always kept it full. She hugged me, real tight, and whispered, "He wouldn't have just walked off." I nodded, But the truth is, I still don't know. I've been over that night 100 times in my head. I've checked satellite maps, old local news reports, anything that might give a clue. It's like he vanished between two blinks. There's one thing I never told the cops. Not because I was hiding it, but because it felt too weird, too hard to explain. The night Jesse disappeared, about an hour before I fell asleep, we passed this old, beat-up sign on the side of the highway, half buried in snow. It said, "Some roads weren't meant to be found." Jesse pointed it out and laughed, said it looked like something out of a horror movie. I laughed too, but something about it stuck with me. Later, when I tried to find that spot again, it was gone. No trace of the sign. I've driven that route 3 more times since. Nothing there but white fields and broken fences. Nowadays, I don't drive at night anymore. I know that probably sounds dumb for a trucker, but after what happened, I just can't do it. I get anxious when I see snow piling up on the side of the road, and sometimes when I park at a rest stop, I swear I hear footsteps crunching around the rig. Always behind me, never close enough to see. And once, outside a diner in Montana, I came back from the restroom and found Jesse's thermos on my dash. The same one I gave to his sister. I asked around, even checked the cameras. Nothing. It disappeared the next day. I don't expect people to believe me. Hell, I'm not sure I believe myself sometimes. But I know what I saw. I know Jesse was there. I know his jacket didn't get 10 miles into a frozen field by accident. Something took him. I don't know what it was or why it happened, but I'm done looking for answers. If you ever find yourself pulling over in the middle of a Wyoming blizzard and the snow feels just a little too quiet, don't stay. Keep driving. Some places don't want you to stop. Back in the summer of 2017, I was working long hauls for a mid-sized agricultural distributor based out of Georgia. I'd been driving trucks for about 8 years at that point, solo, no team, and most of my runs were down into Florida, hauling everything from fertilizer to greenhouse equipment. That week, I'd been assigned a delivery to a small nursery just outside Immokalee. It was one of those places you could barely find on GPS, and the dirt road leading to it looked more like a hunting trail than a delivery route. I wasn't new to back roads, though, so I just eased the rig forward and trusted the directions the owner had texted me earlier. It was a little past 4 p.m. when I turned off onto the nursery's access road. The trees around me changed almost instantly. Pine gave way to thick cypress and a wall of tangled underbrush, the kind of place where the air felt heavy even with the windows up. I remember the road narrowing so much I had to inch the trailer through, hoping I didn't brush the sides too hard. About half a mile in, the ground suddenly shifted beneath me. My back tires sunk with this slow, ugly groan, like something giving way under pressure. When I stepped out to check, my boots sank 2 inches into the muck. The trailer was stuck in soft earth, right at the edge of what looked like the swamp that stretched off into the tree line. I wasn't too worried at first. I'd been in worse situations. I climbed back into the cab, called dispatch, and they said they'd contact a local tow service. I also tried calling the nursery owner, this guy named Rick I'd only spoken to once, but it went straight to voicemail. So I sat tight, engine idling low, windows cracked just enough to hear the woods around me. I kept busy scrolling through my phone, but the signal was spotty, and after a while the battery started dipping below 20%. I remember glancing out the windshield and noticing how fast the sun was dropping behind the trees. That eerie orange hue started bleeding into the sky, the kind that makes everything feel just a little off. It wasn't long after the lights started to fade that I caught the first whiff of it. A sharp, almost sour stench, like rotting meat mixed with stagnant water. I figured maybe something had died nearby, happens in swampy areas, but then I heard it, the sound of footsteps. slow, dragging ones, like someone walking with one leg stiff or injured. At first I thought it might be the tow guy showing up on foot, maybe scouting the terrain before bringing his rig in. I leaned out the driver's side window, squinting toward the tree line, but saw nothing. The footsteps stopped. Then, after a few seconds, they started again. Closer this time, circling around toward the back of the trailer. I turned off the engine to listen better, and that was a mistake. The second the rumble died, the silence that followed felt unnatural, like the whole swamp was holding its breath. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box and opened the door, but I hesitated. There was this feeling in my chest, like something telling me don't get out. My hand was halfway to the door handle when I heard a low thud against the trailer. Not a knock, not metal creaking, more like a body hitting it. Then nothing. Just that awful smell thickening in the air. I slowly leaned over and locked the passenger door, then mine too. That's when I remembered the dash cam. I reached up to tap it, hoping it was still recording. A few minutes passed. I tried calling dispatch again. No answer. I texted them instead. Still waiting. Anyone coming? Message failed. I sat there staring into the rear-view mirror, which reflected nothing but the dim outline of the swamp behind me. Then another sound. Scraping. Like fingernails or something sharp, dragging across the back doors of the trailer. I froze. I knew I should look. I wanted to look, but something told me that whatever I saw, I wouldn't be able to unsee. Still, my curiosity got the better of me. I cracked the driver's side door just enough to lean out and shine the flashlight toward the rear. Nothing. Just trees, shadows, and a dense fog rolling in low to the ground like smoke. But when I angled the beam toward the trailer's back, I saw the marks, streaks across the metal. Long, uneven smears that looked dark and wet. I stepped out slowly, one boot crunching into the wet gravel, and walked around the side, keeping my light steady. That's when I saw the handprints, dozens of them, all over the rear doors. Some big, some small, but all smeared like someone had slapped them there in a panic or in pain. The substance was dark and thick. Blood? Mud? I couldn't tell. But the smell, it was stronger back there, like whatever it was had just left. I backed away, slowly, my stomach turning, climbed back into the cab and locked everything again. My heart was pounding. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe some animal? Maybe locals messing around? But the prints, they were too human. I decided to drive forward, even if it meant tearing up the tires. I threw the truck into gear and hit the gas, but the wheels just spun, flinging mud everywhere. I was stuck, completely. So I sat there, clutching the wheel, sweating, praying I'd see headlights from the tow soon. But nobody came. Not in 30 minutes. Not in an hour. And the swamp outside got darker and quieter. At some point, I must have dozed off, but I don't remember closing my eyes. I just remember jolting awake to the sound of tapping, this light, deliberate tapping right by the passenger side window. 3 times. Then nothing. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. I just stared ahead into the black windshield, barely able to see anything through the fog and night. My flashlight had rolled onto the floor, out of reach, and my phone was dead. I sat there for what felt like forever, until the silence outside slowly returned. That smell lingered, though. That awful damp stench, like something crawling up through the mud and into the cab with me. When the first light of morning started to creep through the trees, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I stepped out, more out of desperation than courage, and walked around the trailer to check the back. The prints were still there, but now they were dry, flaky. And there were more of them. Higher up, like someone had tried to climb the doors. I didn't stick around to process it. I called dispatch again. This time, the call went through. When I asked why no one ever came, the guy on the line, Phil, said they never got a call from me. I told him the time I called, even showed my outgoing log when I got service again. He just kept saying, "That's weird, man. We had no record of it." A tow finally arrived around 9:30 a.m. The guy took one look at the back of my trailer and went pale. Didn't say anything, just hooked me up and got me out. When I asked if he'd seen anything weird around here before, he just muttered, "You're lucky it was just handprints," then wouldn't say another word for the rest of the drive. When I got back to the yard in Georgia, I went to check the dashcam footage, hoping at least that could explain what happened. But the files from that entire night were gone. The card had footage from before and after, but nothing between 5 p.m. and sunrise. Just a black gap. I ended up quitting that company a few months later. Haven't hauled anything south of Gainesville since. I still think about that night sometimes. About what might have been out there. About the handprints. The dragging steps. That smell. I never figured out what it was. Maybe I don't want to. But to this day, every time I hear frogs croaking after dark, I get this tight knot in my chest, like something's about to step out of the trees. Like something's watching. And I don't think I'll ever go near another Florida swamp again.